Good evening and welcome to Sunday Night Live. That's right. Tonight we start into our newest series on the minor prophets. And we're going to begin with, you shouldn't come out of the chute with the very best that you have to offer. But I'll tell you, when we thought about doing the minor prophets, I wanted to start with a great, encouraging book. And there's just no book in the Bible that's more real and down to earth about what it means to be a human being in this wicked, sinful world and trying to serve the Lord, that gets as honest and as raw as what the book of Habakkuk does. I mean, it just gets down to the nitty-gritty. It's just real because it pours out the emotions of serving God in a world where nobody wants to serve God. And it just gets real about the fact that it's hard to see all of the stuff that goes on in the world, and the wicked prosper, and the good be eaten alive by them. And saying, Lord, why do you allow this? Why aren't you doing more about it? That's the sense of the book of Habakkuk. But then, as it closes, we see the essence, the heart of what it means to really be committed to God no matter what. What it means to truly love the Lord your God first. And to truly be in covenant with Him, no matter what the cost. It's a great book. And I hope you enjoy our study. Now, before we dive in, I want to share a few upcoming events with you. First of all, I want you to be thinking about the month of August. The month of August is every single year is our family emphasis month. This year we're going to make a particular push towards the idea of parenting. Lenore and I will be doing a parenting class. I'll be leading that. There'll be some, Daniel, you've got a whole slate of different activities for different age groups and different aspects of the family. And then, of course, at the end of the month, we always have our picnic in the park that last Sunday in August. So be thinking and looking forward to that. The first Sunday in August, August 5th, we have once more coming this year, the second service, the Oakland Christian football team and all of their parents and family. And last year, we don't know how many to expect. We had about 70 visitors last year. That was just the high school team. But this year, we've invited the junior high team and the elementary school teams and their families. So we may be sitting up on these ledges where the lights are. I'm not sure. We don't know how many will be here, but what a great thing that'll be. And we'll feed them after that as well. So be looking forward to that. What a great crowd we'll have that day. And then we look forward just a little farther out. And we get into the month of October. And that first week in October, we have our annual renewal program. Now last year, remember, we had Kevin Swiger and we had Brother Scott Gleaves and others who came in. Bobby Price. This year, we have 3 speakers coming as well. The first is Brother Byron Benitez, who is flying in from Guatemala and is going, you probably heard me talk about him and Hiawatha, my 2 good friends of 20 plus years, and what great preachers and missionaries. They've been down there for 18 years, and I think it'll be a great perspective. He's a great preacher. You'll be greatly blessed by Brother Byron. He'll bring his wife, Sneshana. They have an interesting story of how they met. They've just been married a couple years, and she comes from the Eastern Bloc of the former Soviet Union. It's just a beautiful story. And then we have Brother Wesley Walker, a very well-known, up-and-coming young preacher in his early 30s from Nashville, Tennessee, is going to come and be one of the other speakers. And then the third fella you probably never heard of. Really nobody knows him. His name is Jerry Tallman. He's going to be rounding out our program as we have those 3 great men for a week of Bible study as we look at what it means to walk as Jesus walked. So be putting that on your calendar as well. And then if you know any preachers in Michigan, in November we're going to have the first annual Sermon Share Conference, which will be targeted specifically at preachers in the state of Michigan to bring us together and to, as we talked about, one of our goals here is to be a lighthouse church. That's why we have the leadership seminar, Leader Lift, in March every year. Now we have the sermon seminar in November of every year, where we bring in preachers and help the smaller congregations, men who are laboring there hard, working well, and trying to have as many resources to be able to assist them and be a lighthouse to these other congregations. So be thinking about all of that coming up in the very, very near future. Now, as we dive into the book of Habakkuk, we're going to do something a little different tonight. Pull out your songbooks, and you may not need them. These are pretty familiar songs to us, but we're going to sing a verse or two of 606, 797, and 915, and we'll get to them as we go. That's 606, 797, and 915. Habakkuk is a 7th century prophet. So 700 years before the time of Christ, Habakkuk was laboring with the people of Judah. And everything we know of him comes from this book. So we don't have any extra biblical information about who Habakkuk was. We don't know anything from any other book of the Bible about who Habakkuk was. But we don't need it, because this rich, short book tells us all we need to know about his person and his character. To understand Habakkuk, it's important, since we just got one lesson to cover this great and rich book, it's important to have an overview of the book. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the events, and you can use this to study it out on your own. In verses 1 through 4 that was read for us a moment ago, you heard Habakkuk's heartfelt questioning of God about him tolerating Judah's sin. He looks around and he's frustrated. God, why are you allowing all of this to happen? God, where is your justice? Where is your wrath? Lord, where is God in this dark, dark world? And I think so many of us have had moments where we relate to that sentiment and that emotion. Verses 5 through 11 of chapter 1. God reveals his plan and tells him that he's going to raise up Babylon in judgment to the nation of Judah for their wickedness. But in chapter 1, verses 12 through chapter 2, verse 1, Habakkuk expresses his great displeasure at this plan. Hold on, Lord. Our people are wicked, so you're going to punish them through more wicked people than even we are? This doesn't seem like a good plan at all. Because Babylon, in his mind, is even worse. So he questions God again. Twice in the book so far, Habakkuk is saying, Lord, I need to question you. And then we look in chapter 2, verses 2 through 10. God replies that Babylon will also be judged in their due time. And then in chapter 3, 1 through 16, Habakkuk enters into a time of prayer and receives a vision of judgment that gives him some degree of clarity. And then he closes out in chapter 3, verses 17 through 19, as the prophet closes with an assertion of his unshakable faith in God, whether he understands God's motives and actions or not. His unshakable faith in God. So the book shows us that God's judgment is indiscriminate. That's a major theme throughout the work. He judges even the sins of his own people. That God is indeed just. But judgment of all sin of every people is therefore the central theme of the book. And this is why God has Habakkuk write out chapter 2 and verse 12, where it reads, Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, who establishes a city by iniquity. The absoluteness of God's wrath in the book is just humbling when you read it, as it profoundly impacts the prophet. Chapter 2 and verse 20, Habakkuk will say, And the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silent before him. He is absolutely in awe of God's might, his power, and his divine holy wrath. Besides the clear emphasis that God is serious in regard to his judgment of sin, there is a great many instructions that can be learned from this book. And that's where I want us to spend our time and focus, is just through some practical things we can take from it that hopefully will help us to have the kind of faith Habakkuk puts forward in the last chapter of this great book. 3 powerful lessons we learn from the book of Habakkuk. Number 1, it is all right to have an unclear picture of God's working, and it's even all right. Now, this is not going to sound like it lines up with what we've always thought, but it's even all right to question Him. Look at chapter 1, verse 1, where it says plainly, the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out, you violence, and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? He's questioning God. He's saying, Lord, you've made some promises. Lord, you have talked about your wrath and your judgment, and that you care for the righteous and that you despise the wicked. Well, where is that care and where is that despising? I can't see it. He questions God. Do you know how many Old Testament characters question God? Let me just tell you, it's a long list. Moses questioned God. David questioned God. Abraham questioned God. Is that a pretty good company to be in? Friend of God? Deliverer of God's people? Man after God's own heart. That's good company to be in. The prophets, oh my goodness. The prophets make it a habit. I mean, it is their go-to thing to do, is they have conversations with God, and in the course of those conversations, they say, I don't understand. This doesn't make much sense. Think about Elijah. Did he question God? Oh, without question. Jeremiah. Y'all know I love Jeremiah, the moody prophet. That's what the title of my commentary on the book, if I ever write one, will be. The moody prophet. The guy was bipolar. That's what they would do. That's what they would say about him today. I can prove it. Listen, he wrote this. Lamentations. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. We sing that song, don't we? His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great, O Lord, is thy faithfulness unto me. It's beautiful. He also wrote this. You, O Lord, are like an unreliable stream, that when I go to drink, you leave me thirsty and dry. That's also Jeremiah in the book of Jeremiah. He is all over the map. And you see this all the way. The minor prophets, you're going to see it again and again and again. Lord, I mean, they call God out on God's promises. Will we ever do that? Maybe we should. Maybe we should. It is not a lack of faith to have communication with the Almighty. It's a lack of faith because you don't get the answers to stop serving Him. But every single one of those men that we've discussed today, Habakkuk included, every single one of those men, they may not always have liked everything God did. They may not always agreed with His divine wisdom, and they may have told Him so in no uncertain words. But at the end of the day, whatever frustration they had, they still got up off their knees and they served Him anyway. That's faith. You see, a relationship is not just yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. It's not a relationship. God doesn't just want a servant. He wants a friend and a child and a son and a daughter. It's always been about relationship. And in relationships, you converse. In relationships, you even disagree. But when your relationship is with the King, at the end of the day, after the conversation, you always obey. Even if you don't understand. You see, like so many, Habakkuk clearly is confused by the justice of God question. There's a lot of folks who are confused by that. To this very day, that seems to be the most common objection When people say, I don't know if I can believe there's a God because of all the evil in the world. That is exactly what the book of Habakkuk is about. Is a man who's trying to serve the Lord, who's trying to be good and loves all things that are good, looking around and saying, this isn't right. Where are you, God? Study Habakkuk with people who question. The book is powerfully impactful when it comes to answering that. But you see, Habakkuk had to understand at the end of the day, just as Moses and David and Daniel and Jeremiah and Elijah and all that had gone before who had had those plain conversations with God. He had to understand that he's human and God's not. And he had a real relationship where he could express his heart and emotions. But in that prayer life, he was seeking to find understanding. You see, the Bible talks about as iron sharpens iron, so man sharpens man. You see, real relationship is where we improve one another and we grow with each other. And God wants real relationship with us. But all we have to do is remember, he's God and I'm not. That first song that I mentioned, 606. The things that I love. Think about the words. And hold dear to my heart are just borrowed. They're not mine at all. Jesus, only let me use them to brighten my life. So remind me, dear Lord. Remind me of what? Roll back the curtain of memory now and then. Show me where you brought me from and where I could have been. Remember, I'm human. And humans forget. Humans don't always understand. Humans question. Humans say, I don't get it. Remember, I'm human. And implied in that is, and you're not. So remind me, dear Lord. Remind me, dear Lord. And so as we think about that song, the next verse, and I'd like us to sing that one together, speaks even more powerfully to the reality of our humanity. Nothing good have I done, listen to the words, to deserve God's own Son. I'm not worthy of the scars in His hands. Yet He chose the road to Calvary to die in my stead. Why He loved me, I can't understand. So roll back the curtain of memory now and then. Show me where you brought me from and where I could have been. Remember, I'm human, and humans forget and question and wonder. So remind me, dear Lord. It's okay to question. It's okay to be human, as long as we know He's God and we're not. And at the end of the conversation, He's still going to be God, and we're still going to serve Him. The second thing we learn from this great book is that prayer is our tool to conquer our doubts. Prayer is how Habakkuk addressed this. The honest prayer, raw, down to earth, real. But prayer was his vehicle through which he could find that comfort and that solace and know again that God, He is in control. You see, Habakkuk had the same responsibility of every prophet, the same responsibility of every leader in the church today, every preacher right now, every elder, and that he had to lead, he had to feed, and he had to intercede. Those are the threefold task of every leader. Lead the people, feed the people spiritually, intercede for the people in prayer. And that's precisely what he's doing here. He's praying, God, why aren't you bringing on your justice so people will be righteous again? And he knows that can't be accomplished. He can preach sermons all day, every day. But if he's not interceding with God on behalf of the people, if he's not got that communication, if he doesn't have that relationship with him, then he cannot see real justice brought about. Habakkuk's go-to solution for despair, confusion, and dread was to hit his knees and to pray, to turn to God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10, Apostle Paul says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelation, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul says, I had a great affliction. And so what did I do? I pleaded with the Lord. You think that was an honest conversation? You think there was any of this type of wording? Lord, I'm an apostle. I got a lot to do. This is a hindrance to me. What's going on? But God, he didn't even get the answer he wanted. But the prayer was the vehicle to comfort. Because at the end of that, whether he understood or whether he didn't, he knew God's in control. He's God. I'm his servant. And it brought him peace. It brought him peace. That second song that we mentioned at 797, the first verse says, Lord, we come before thee now. Talking about prayer and turning to him in all of our difficulties and struggles. At thy feet we humbly bow. Lord, do not our suit disdain. And then you hear almost the honesty of Habakkuk in this. Shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? And then, Lord, on thee, our second verse, our souls depend. Your compassion now descend. Fill our hearts with thy rich grace. Tune our lips to sing thy praise. You see, that song that we've sung 1,000 times is an honest prayer. A prayer of doubt. A prayer of struggle. Lord, we come before thee now. At thy feet we humbly bow. Thou do not our suit disdain. Shall we seek, listen to the pleading, Lord, in vain? Shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? Lord, on thee our souls we have nowhere else to turn. In compassion now descend. Fill our hearts with thy rich grace. Tune our lips to sing thy praise. Tune our lips to sing thy praise. What an honest prayer. Prayer of doubt, from which we leave again in the strength of faith. Which leads us to the third message of the book of Habakkuk. Our greatest power in good times and bad is to trust in God unconditionally. Not dependent upon the circumstances around us. We may not like the circumstances. We may grumble about the circumstances. We may show our displeasure with those circumstances. It's all right as long as we trust Him regardless of those circumstances. To Habakkuk, "In God we trust" was more than a slogan. It was the mantra of his life. In the book we see his closing words as he closes out the book. Verse 16 of chapter 3. "When I heard, my body trembled, my lips quivered, and my voice rottenness entered my bones. I trembled in myself, that I might rest in the day of trouble, that when he comes up, these people, he will invade them with his troops." In other words, this is a bad day. The news isn't really all that good a news. Yes, God's going to punish the wickedness, but it's going to do it through wiping out the nation and carrying them all into captivity, and through people that are even worse than we are. That doesn't sound very good. He says, but, verse 17, and just let these words soak in. "Though the fig tree may not blossom, or fruit be on the vine, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, and though the flocks be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls." You know what he's describing? Everything that can go wrong does go wrong. They all become a catastrophe. Even if life is a catastrophe, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and He will make my feet like deer's feet, and He will make me walk on the high hills. You see how the book begins and ends? "Lord, I don't understand. Lord, I just think we need to have a talk about this. I don't really like that answer, Lord." But no matter what answer, I will serve you no matter what. We all know the words of this. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His Word, what a glory she sheds on our way. As we do His good will, in good and bad, in hard times and good times, even if the world's a catastrophe, we do His good will. He abides with us still, and with all who will trust, question sometimes, argue sometimes, trust and obey. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His Word, what a glory He sheds on our way, while we do His good will. In good times and bad, He abides with us still in every moment. And all who will trust and obey. There's only one answer to life's calamities. Trust and obey. For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. The book of Habakkuk I believe is powerful because it's so honest. But it doesn't leave us wondering. It leaves us knowing that we're not always going to have all the answers. We're not always going to agree with the things that happen and don't happen. And we're not always going to understand why God intercedes and sometimes He doesn't. And we're never going to understand all those things. And it's all right to be human, to not understand it. If we go to Him through that powerful avenue of relationship, through prayer, and determine, even if the fig tree fails, even if there's no more herds in the stalls, Lord, Job put it this way, even if you slay me, still I will serve you. I may not always like it. I may not always understand it. But faithfulness is not about being a robot. It's about the will to trust and obey. Tonight, if you need to renew your commitment to the God who, He's got all this. He's in control, but He can handle the devil and all these terrible things that we endure. But if you've allowed the questioning's not the problem. If you've allowed the questioning to affect whether or not you get up and still serve Him, that's when you got troubles. Then let us go to our knees with you again tonight and renew that covenant. And tell the Lord today, what a great thing you could tell Him today, is that from this day forward, from the very first day in July in 2018 to whatever my last day is in this wicked world, Lord, I know I won't always do right. I'll make mistakes and stumble and fall. And Lord, I may not even always like it. But here's what I'll tell you, what I promise, Lord, what I decide, what my will has committed to is I'll always get up. And I'll always be your man. I'll always be your woman. I'll always be yours. If you come now as we stand and as we sing.